Welcome to this episode of Season 5 of The Common Bridge, where policy and current events are discussed in a fiercely nonpartisan manner. The host, Richard Helppie, is a philanthropist, entrepreneur, and political analyst who has reached over 4 million listeners, viewers, and readers around the world. With our surging growth in audience and subscriptions, The Common Bridge continues to expand its reach. The show is available on the Substack website and the Substack app. Simply search for The Common Bridge. You can also find us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. The Common Bridge draws guests and audiences from across the political spectrum, and we invite you to become a free or paid subscriber on your favorite medium.
Hello, welcome to The Common Bridge. I'm your host, Rich Helppie, and we have got an extraordinarily great guest today, all the way from Kosovo, Mr. Jarmo Feliks Helppikangas. Jarmo, it's very good to see you.
Very good to see you too, Iris.
Well, your background and your skill set, I understand that you were a police officer in Finland, a police chief in Finland, and that you've also have a law degree. And that sounds like great preparation for this role.
Yes, indeed. It was because what was initially looked for in those missions, it was like to have something who understands about policing, but knows also about the prosecution and to see that the policing like a complete package as it is, and then how we understand it. For example, criminal investigations without the involvement of the prosecution. It is just one part of that. It is much operational, technical, scientific maybe, but how to use all that information in a trial, that's the other side of the story, and then you go for the prosecution. So, yeah, they were looking for some legal advisors there, and I looked at that and I compared my CV and I said, this is mine. So it happened that we were selected there, few of us. There were actually 4 Finnish prosecutors at the time, starting that first mission in there. And yes, after 5 years in there, I then finished my work in there. That work in there, of course, is not yet done.
I see. And the challenge has to be you started with no justice system, no effective policing force, with ethnic war, and now the country is populated by Albanians and Serbians with a terrible history between them. And is one of the big challenges having a police system and a prosecution system that both the Albanians and the Serbians will support?
This is indeed a challenge because to have the trust after all the mistrust, it is a challenge and it is still a challenge. That challenge has not disappeared anywhere. Yes, there is still like, I'm still back in the history. I'm starting the CSDD mission in here, but to jump from here to where we are now, maybe to cut long story a bit shorter, it is at some point, because we were like about 3,000, a bit less than 3,000 as a mission with all these people around. It was a very, very big mission and it had executive authorities in here. So our judges, police, prosecutors, they were doing actually the work of these executive authorities. And now, since 2018, we still have the same mission is still here, but it only has the monitoring, advisory role and so forth. And it is one part of the EU presence in here. Now, going to where we stand or where I sit, it is a different story again, because there are two, you introduced me as a EU Commission. Now, EU is here with the 2 different separate segments, and one of them is the EUSR. It is the European Union Special Representative in Kosovo. There are few EUSRs around the world, not so many, but they are kind of a more flexible tool for the EU to help in the countries in this post-war, post-crisis environment, and it is kind of a transitional status from the CSDP missions that were purely crisis management to something that is like with the political assistance, helping to approach the legislation with the EU legislation and all that. So we are kind of a one step further. Next step would be probably that if Kosovo gets the candidate status to get in the EU, then the EU office, it is currently called office, and I explain in a moment why. They would then take over if this process goes to status of having a candidate status. The similar kind of procedure was going on in Bosnia. They are now a candidate. They still have a little bit of EUSR in there. But at some point, EUSR will disappear and then the EU delegation will continue in there. Now, why Bosnia is called delegation and Kosovo is called office, it is just a story about the EU, because EU is not one state, it is many states. And of course, these states need to act in consensus and they need to agree on things. And what the EU does not do, EU does not recognize states. The EU member states, one by one, they recognize states. And currently EU is in a status regarding Kosovo, that there are 5 states that do not recognize, and then you have the 22 who do.
Yes.
And that's why delegation does not exist in here, but we have the office, because there is a fine-tuned distinction between these two.
And I understand that the borders between Serbia and Kosovo might be part of a negotiation where more ethnic Serbian areas might become part of Serbia again, and more ethnic Albanian parts might become part of Kosovo. Did I understand that correctly?
There has been a time that this kind of ideas have been floating up in the air. There is no clear idea yet, or let's say clear common understanding how these things should go ahead. And I remember that in the period when Donald Trump was the president, this idea was more on the table, this border demarcation, or kind of making the border in between in a different way and following the ethnic lines. But this has not been the initial EU idea on this. That's why. And now we go actually back to one other Finn, just to mention what happened back in the time. You remember probably our former president Martti Ahtisaari.
Yes.
And he was a special envoy from the UN, and he was here to try to make a proposal for the transition. It was called comprehensive proposal, and it is still in here. It used to be also in the constitution of Kosovo quite some time until they removed it from there. But the principles and many of the laws are still in line with that idea. Back in 2007, we were here as an international community supporting Kosovo to align their legislation. There were like about 42 laws, starting from constitution, law, police, civil registry, you just name it. All the essentials for running a state. And they were all based on the proposal of this, our former president Martti Ahtisaari as an envoy. Initial idea was that the UN would accept it, but for the reasons related to world politics, it never happened.
It must be very difficult to start from scratch, start from the beginning where there's nothing, a blank sheet of paper, with two predominant ethnicities that have come and gone from their region depending on what was happening politically, and then try to engage the rule of law. So when you were a police officer and a police chief in Finland, there was an understanding of what the law was and what the rights were of defendants and what the integrity of the court system was. How does that compare with what you found in Kosovo and what you're trying to achieve in Kosovo?
Well, when I came in here, of course, there was already a quite advanced system in place, and that was developed with the interim administration of the United Nations mission in here, UNMIC. So there were criminal code, criminal procedure code, and all the legislation that was promulgated, approved by, it was happening through this United Nations interim administration. And this was the, the applicable law in here until 2008, 17th of February, when the independence was declared. And it was not a, not a regulated situation. Also, if you think about the laws in former Yugoslavia, there were many laws that were actually not discriminative. They were quite advanced. If you look at their criminal procedure code, criminal code, all that. But there has been periods of time where the legislation has been changed, and not always bearing in mind that there are many ethnicities, many different people living in that country that doesn't anymore exist. But it is, let's say, Wild West it was not, but there was a misuse of such systems times.
So we have American journalists in Russia today that have been sent to prison for a long time. We have people in the United States of America that believe justice is not administered evenly. What have you been able to do to get all of the different groups in Kosovo to agree that there is a fair justice system?
There was a period where the parties managed to agree on something called dialogue between the parties. Belgrade, they call it dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, and in Kosovo it is called something like the dialogue between the Republic of Kosovo and Republic of Serbia. Mm-hmm. And in this dialogue, they at some point agreed on, for example, how the policing will be done in the area that is with a Serb majority, how the justice will be delivered in there, how the prosecution is organized in there, what would be the composition of courts to ensure that both parties would trust on the justice they receive.
Do ethnic Albanians, if they're appearing before a ethnic Serbian judge, do they believe they'll be treated fairly?
The mistrust, I would think, I'm not following it every day, but we of course follow, as a EU family, we follow the trials and all that, and the mistrust is there, and there are elements, of course, that are kind of feeding it. And where I wanted to go with this recently, it was like, not remembering the date, but more than 1 year ago. At some point, all the Serbs, they resigned from their positions as judges, police, prosecution, municipal authorities, municipal mayors, and they kind of stopped the already created system where this kind of justice existed, and they could go and speak with their own Serbian-speaking police, for example, to ask for help. But they just stepped out. And this is something that from outside world was, of course, and it was quite openly done, because they went to meet first with President Vučić in Belgrade, and after a few months it happened, just like that. When they said, now go, everybody did it at the same time. Now, how does it work now? It is a bit of a question mark, of course, because they kind of destroyed the system that was made to build their trust. On the other hand, the authorities in Kosovo, and I don't know how much I can actually talk about that, but they are actively trying to make the rule of law, the policing, the courts to happen throughout Kosovo, and that would include that corner of Kosovo which is populated by the Serbs.
I see. You mentioned also, or it's been mentioned, about the advancement of human rights. What types of things have been challenges, and what is your work doing about getting better human rights?
Well, first and foremost, it is, of course, about awareness, because people should understand what are their rights and how they can get to their rights, how the justice system works, and how they can get, for example, their property rights back. Or, property rights is probably a good and also painful example on this, because, of course, after the war, things are a bit different than they used to be, and not, how to say, the civilian population is very rarely guilty for all the bad changes that happen. But in any case, people need to live somewhere and all that, and to restore the property rights in this kind of situation, it is a challenge. UN and MIC, there was a House and Property Commission, for example, who were deciding over cases where somebody's property was taken by the other ethnicity, and it works both ways. Serbs in Albanian properties, Albanians in Serb properties. And there were like tens of thousands of those kind of cases going on. And many of them were restored, but the tendency was, of course, that if somebody's property was returned to the rightful owner, it was reoccupied. and the situation continued. So many of these situations happened, but let's say already that UN time, they tried to deal with this, and there were institutions established by UN, and they were staffed by international judges and all that, in an attempt to try to restore it. But when the independence came and all that, it was the Kosovo institutions that took over on that. And this is the work what they are doing, and this is the work what we are trying to promote them to do in equally, and then taking into consideration not only the property rights, but also the rights of the people who were occupying, and they are not, how to say, thrown on the streets. But their rights are also taken care so that the municipalities, social authorities, or whatever is needed would then take care that people would not be treated too harshly. But yes, the human rights, somebody's right is somebody else's obligation, and this needs to be, of course, addressed. And we are still part of this kind of mechanisms to ensure that it is done in a way that both parties would feel equally treated and would trust the justice. But there is one thing which I still did not mention a lot, but maybe it's good to mention at this context because it influences to everything. It is when we have two states, the other one who says, this is all mine, and the other one who says, we are independent and don't come here to tell us how to do. There is certain kind of dilemma.
We're not recognizing them as an independent country. And then, property rights seem to be the foundation of freedom. And we have people here challenging it in our political system in the United States. We have leading figures saying they need to redistribute things and make sure everybody starts with the same amount, and it means you got to take it away from somebody. And my understanding of history, I don't think that's ever worked, and certainly has never worked without bloodshed and destruction of the society. Jarmo, you also mentioned about the advancing gender equality. I know nothing at all about the background of gender inequality. So, what have you discovered, and what has your work done in terms of pursuing gender equality?
Yes, this is something that can probably say without any hesitation that it is not something that we can do with one big deed. We do something very good and everything changes, because this is all about people's minds and how they are actually growing up to be adults and all that. I personally sometimes got a bit of trouble seeing where is the problem, because I come from a country where the father made the food and cleaned when need be and washed the laundry when need be, and there was no difference between are you the man or the woman, because both had the same responsibilities. But indeed, it is still present in here. And what we do is, of course, we try again, and we speak about the awareness. We try to increase the awareness of the rights of the both.
Yeah,
both
and
genders.
And maybe you need to teach them all to speak Finnish, because Finnish does not have any gender-specific pronouns. There's no such thing in the language, and it takes a minute to get used to it. I speak no Finn, huva that's it, kiitos, and it's very interesting. And that's interesting that you're coming from a country that has been at the forefront of women in leadership positions and inequality in an equal status. That sounded like inequality when I said it, but women with equal status. And of course, Finland is the home to the best looking, most intelligent, and most clever people on the planet. That's my view, anyway.
We say with the Finnish roots, yes, we have to little bit lift our own tail.
Indeed. And then, Jarmo, one of the things I understand is finding work for those people that have left Kosovo. They've gone elsewhere, mostly in the European Union. They'd like to come home if there's work. What's the economy like, and are things getting better or worse or staying the same?
Well, only recently, what we have noticed in here is that the price level definitely is going up, whereas the pay level, the salary level, is not doing the same, and of course it causes people troubles. It is like I understand that everywhere a little bit the prices have gone because of all the crisis what we have and the war in Ukraine and all that. But here it is even more visible, and knowing that the average salaries in here are like very far away from what they are, for example, in Finland. Yes, you see that people are suffering on this. It is for sure like that. And on the other hand, there is, it was read recently a number that only in Germany they have like about 500,000 Kosovars living in there. and there is really big proportion of the people from here. They are working abroad, and they have been working there like quite some time. All the time what I have been here, and I remember 2007, for example, I was once driving from Montenegro to Kosovo, and there was this, it was July. And in July, there are like long queues of the cars, German, Italian, Switzerland, you just name it. There are really plenty of. And it was the first summer after the Declaration of Independence. The police was giving tickets on the border which said, these are the traffic rules in Kosovo, and you better obey them, And they were driving like in euphoria, like nobody was speeding, they were just enjoying. Now this is the independent Kosovo. It was nice. But what I want to say with this is not only that, but also that there has always been diaspora, and they have always been working abroad, and they have always supported their families in here. So that diaspora has been kind of good support for the economy in here. And there are some calculations. I don't remember those numbers and all that, but it's quite some support. And if I look around in here, we are living in a block of flats in here. And when I first came here, there was like green fields around. Now, after about 8 years, all around, you don't see green field, you see just block of flats. And guess what? This block of flats, they are not how to say, lived in all year around. But now, for example, July, August, those windows, they open and there are actually people in there. And
nice.
these are people who work abroad, and they of course come here. Their home. This is the home. Like the Finns. You maybe don't remember that, but maybe you were not in there. But the Finns that were working in Sweden, and there were about 500,000 of them at some point. When each summer they came with their rented Volvos and Saabs, and they populated every place with their thing. But of course, they wanted to come home, of course, always. I think the same, exactly the same.
And well, they must have confidence in the rule of law and property rights when they come home, that their flat will be available to them and someone hasn't moved in. And so the work you're doing there is bringing about peace, it's bringing about order, and it's bringing about opportunity for the younger generations. And we are at risk in our country, the United States, about going in the opposite direction of not trusting the legal system, at not respecting property rights. And I don't know if it could ever be put back together again. Kosovo's population of 1.5 million, how difficult it is to establish a respected rule of law, respected property rights, and opportunity for young people. The United States, we need to work on this and stop our partisan battles and realize that we have a country that does have a rule of law if we can keep it. But I digress. Jarmo, as we come to the end of our talk today, what would you like the audience of the Common Bridge to know from your position in Kosovo?
Well, what would you need to know? To think about that. It's important to know that there is, if you look at the legal framework, the constitutional framework in here, most of the things what we would expect to have in there are in place. The legal system is there. The criminal code has been revised, like I think we are now on the third round of revising it. The criminal procedure code is done with, and it is in line with the standards what we have in EU for the criminal procedure. The Kosovo constitution recognizes, without Kosovo being a member of any of the convention, Kosovo constitution recognizes above its own laws the human rights conventions, European Convention of Human Rights, the UN Convention, even the Istanbul Convention, when we speak about the rights of the women and the actions against violence against women and all that. There are multiple actions in here ongoing all the time to improve the system. And what we see happening in here is that many things have gone better. Sometimes we complain about things, but it's not because things are very bad. It is like we complain because we want it to be perfect. And we want Kosovo to be very, very good in this classroom of the European family. And that's why we would like to see them even better than what they are now. But it doesn't mean that they are bad now. They have gone many steps since 2000 forward. And I believe that in general, the environment has become better. The trust, like you said, about the justice, and there is really possibility to find justice in it, it is getting better. There is plenty of work to do, but it doesn't mean that it is very bad. It just means that there is plenty of work to do, and there is no other country around here that could say that we are doing better. That's my kind of view.
Well, thank you for that. We've been talking today with Jarmo Helppikangas, a police officer, police chief, attorney, working in Kosovo to bring in the rule of law. And I can't help but editorialize as we in the United States of America are now facing a very tense political situation, so lots of rampant tribalism, partisanship, and we need to do more of the work like they're doing in Kosovo so that we might also form a more perfect union. And this is your host, Rich Helppie, signing off on The Common Bridge.
Thanks for joining us on The Common Bridge. Subscribe to The Common Bridge on Substack.com or use their Substack app where you can find more interviews, columns, videos, and nonpartisan discussions of the day. Just search for The Common Bridge. You can also find The Common Bridge on Mission Control Radio or your Radio Garden app.